Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Can someone maybe give me a sign? Halldor, I think you can hear me, right? Okay, thanks a lot. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon to all of you in China, but I know that someone is also following from Europe. So, good morning. I hope you're having a good coffee. And we're about to start our fourth training of a series of 5 different trainings on science communication organized by EURAXESS China. I think most of you joined our previous sessions. We talked about why science communication can be useful to a researcher's career. Then we had a wonderful training on how to use voice and non-voice gestures on during a public speech and on a stage. And last time we had the dynamic interactive training that was especially focused on how to pitch, how to perform a perfect creative pitch. So today we move on another topic. Today we're talking about online communication and how to approach an international audience. I'm going to start in a second, but first of all, I want to give the opportunity to the 2 colleagues of mine that are here with me today to say hello. So we have Halldor.
Hey Anna, hi everybody. Looking forward to today's event.
Thanks, Halldor. And I can see also Vanessa with a beautiful background.
Hi, hello everyone. 大家好，我是 EURAXESS 的 Vanessa. Okay.
Thank you both. Okay, so today I want to start as we actually also did before by sharing my screen, of course. We're gonna have a presentation. And I want to start with a few questions for you, for our audience, to get an idea of what you're expecting and what's the situation regarding online communication. And so, if you would scan the QR code, especially if you're following the webinar from a computer, you can use your phone to scan it, or otherwise click on the first link. It's the more immediate. With the second one, you need to enter the code that is online. So you'll find the first question that is related to the culture shock. So I'm going to now switch to another page. So hopefully some of you have already joined and we can see the answers. Okay, so the question is, if you have ever been on a work trip abroad, how was working with the foreign colleagues? Was there a cultural shock? So, okay, nobody is saying no cultural shock, so it means that plays quite a role when working with with international partners, and I can see a good amount with limited and major cultural shock. Okay, so let me see if we can move to the second question, that is about like how comfortable you are at the moment when you're communicating with international partners. I hope that the page switched on your browser or on your phone. Yeah, I can see someone is already joining in. So we have, okay, at the moment, more saying they've done it quite a few times so they can manage. Okay, so I feel that we are a bit under pressure here today, since people are saying they're very good at that as well. Luckily, someone say not very comfortable, and I hope that we will be able to, give some good tips and hints, even if you guys are obviously accustomed to it. Okay, then is the last one. You should be able also to choose more than one, and it's about like when you're communicating with someone online, what is the expression that better fits? I'm not sure of the person reaction. Yeah, that's also what I feel and I worry about the most, I guess, in uh, in in many situations. Yeah, the large majority saying like you really it's really hard to get what's the other person reaction. It's we'll see. We'll talk about this. But for saying I feel more comfortable as well because I'm far away. Like in this moment, I could pretend that my connection dropped and disappear if I'm not comfortable giving this webinar, but I won't do it. Okay, so someone else is saying, I'm not sure which is the right tone to use. That's also delicate, and of course, I mean, it depends on many different elements. And one is saying, since COVID, I really became an expert. Yeah, I think anyway, COVID-19 forced all of us to become better and like try to improve our online skills. Okay, so thanks a lot for your inputs. It was I think it was like very interesting to start with like hearing from our audience today. I see 71 people are connected, so I'll move back to my presentation and we start with a very quick overview on today's agenda. You got what the main topic is. We will start with just a few words on different cultural norms and habits. So what it means and like how to cope with like in communicating with partners and researchers who comes from different places in the world and therefore with different cultural norms and etiquettes. Then we will move on communication online, what it is, what are the mediums, and we will then investigate it at 3 different levels. Okay, so we will start from one-to-one communication, when you're sending an email to a potential supervisor or giving a phone call, communication to groups. So again, calls and emails, but also webinars like the one we're doing today. And finally, how to reach mass audience. There we will, we will talk about different possibilities like launching a podcast, making videos, and we also will give you some technical suggestions and ideas from our experience. We will conclude with how to make a video for a slam, for a science slam, and final touch. We will have some last very quick questions to to check your competences. No, just to get a feedback and see if our presentation was efficient and went through today. So stay with us till the end, and let me move. Okay, I was about to forget. In case some of you are not part or any of the 2 WeChat group chats that we created in relation to these trainings, please scan the QR code. This way you can stay updated. And in case you're joining on Tencent or Vov meeting with the name that is not your real name, we can still find you and know that you participated. So at the end of the trainings, you will be awarded the certificate that reflects your participation. Okay, so let me start. Different cultural norms and social etiquettes. These are things that we face when interacting with international partners, because every different community have different way of interrelating, and this reflects on business and work meetings, in greetings, and in everyday life etiquette. Think that even Europe itself is quite a culturally diverse place. I think that during like every day at work, both with Vanessa but also with Halldor, I can feel, and I need to kind of like adapt and know how to relate to them. Also taking into consideration what's the cultural background, what's the work etiquette. So it's a quite fascinating and complex topic, and I think I want to spend a few words on this concept that is that of power distance, that might help when we are trying to prepare and thinking of how to approach a new partner from a different place in the world. So what is power distance? Is basically the degree to which members of a community, that could be Italians or like Chinese, are willing to accept that there's a difference of power, there's a difference of status between the members of the same community. So you see, I've listed a few different perspectives from where one can analyze a community's level of power distance. I think two of the two extremes could be probably on one side the US, a place where the power distance is very little. There's less power distance, with, for example, the Middle East, where the power distance, the hierarchy, and yeah, the distance put between people is probably much higher. So these elements could be ways to start thinking of when you're about to interact with someone from Europe, or you know, trying to connect to a research group in Latin America. So talking, for example, about Europe compared to China, we're probably more on the equal level than the hierarchical level when you compare the two. This doesn't mean that you are welcome to call someone by name, by first name, for the first time, but that there is less importance in terms of hierarchy, and also I would say it's probably more on the direct side versus the indirect way of approaching. So direct could mean, and make me think from my personal experience, that you know, some people in some culture, you tend to not to look someone else in the eye when the other person is talking, because it can be considered offensive. So for someone from Europe, or from a place where the power distance is low, that could actually be counterproductive, right? Because keeping eye contact can communicate that you are interested, that you are following, and you're very much interested in what the person is talking about. Otherwise, that person might think, oh, this guy is just thinking of something else. He doesn't even follow my face as I talk. And then these other then continuing on some other perspectives, maintain more distance, or versus cultures that maintains less distance. These could be something like being invited to someone's home, or planning a phone call, and you can be expected you can expect to be asked about how are you, how's your personal life, how is the family. Some people and some culture prefer to get to know the person they're doing research with or doing business with at a personal level, at least to a certain degree, before really getting down to work. And of course, being able to express the emotions or not, and express opinions or not. And this is very clear, for example, and reflects a lot in the way you might relate with your supervisor, for example. The possibility to be able to confront him with a different opinion, with a different point of view, or on the other side, just be more passive and indirect, because that's what's required and that's what expected in that culture, in that country, in those customs. So the big question is, how are we able to avoid intercultural mistakes when we're approaching someone that comes from such a different place with different habits? Well, we cannot give you a magic recipe, but for sure, always consider that the language that you use in writing and in oral communications needs to reflects the person's culture and habits. You can always get prepared. So when you're about to approach someone for the first time, you can get some information and think, okay, this is a person that comes from a from a low power distance culture, so I can be more direct and spontaneous. And for sure, don't start saying, "Hey, Bob, how are you doing?" when you are approaching someone for the first time. But there are different degrees and different approaches. Also in terms of first approach and greetings. And in general, I would say the recommendation is always to use common sense. And when you're not sure how to react or how to behave, always lean on the side of being very kind and being formal. That is I would say the mistake that will have the least effect, definitely. Okay, so I think we can move on to really talking about the online communication after this short talk about intercultural communication, and I leave it to Halldor, that I see is already on with this PowerPoint.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. This is such an interesting thing, and that you've been discussing, and I really like. I really like it as a starting point. So thank you very much for starting there. I think this is something we should just at least think about. How there may be different habits between countries and so on, and this goes both ways. In Europe, we also sometimes misunderstand how things go here in Asia. I think a lot of people, for example, believe that Japanese and Chinese people are very similar, but they're not. But like Anna herself pointed out, there's this also big difference within Europe. Me as an Icelander, I sometimes I'm fascinating how German people communicate with each other. But these days, the earth is flat. We are all using the internet and online communication, which means that this is something that we stumble upon regularly, especially if you are an international person, like researchers and scientists most of the time are. Sorry, that was my desk chair. And for example, the other day I was helping out a South Korean colleague, a researcher who was working with a German researcher, and that was fascinating to look at because they both have very unique ways to deal with, let's say, other people and communications. So this is very, very interesting very important, and it's something that we all need to know about these days, because these days a lot of the communication that we're going to be doing is going to be online. That's just how it is. And this is maybe something that I think a lot of communication trainings do not really address. Honestly, when it comes to international communication, you might maybe once or twice a year go into an international conference and do some kind of in-person communication, but you will almost definitely be communicating with people on a lot more regular basis through video conferences and so on, probably every week, or even more frequent if you are engaged in such activities at all. It's going to be online, right? So we thought it was really worthwhile to talk a little bit about that, because there are some very simple rules that can help us a lot. And now, since like COVID-19 pushed a lot of people all over the world to work at home, we all have actually developed a lot, and we've learned how to use COVID-19. I saw at the Menti there were like a couple of people that just have become experts at online communication since COVID-19 started. But when we're talking about online communication channels, we're obviously talking about like all these different factors. We're talking about everything from emails and chatbots and like forums and other kind of platforms online where you use text. But we're also talking about like social media, articles and blogs, which is a little bit more composed, let's say. And also these kind of online calls that we do every once in a while, and these webinars we're talking about right now, up to the level of communicating to the whole wide world through videos and other tools like that. And what is important to remember is that the way that you communicate really affects how you communicate. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. There is a saying, the medium is the message, which means basically that as soon as you move into a new medium, a new method to communicate, it will influence how you will communicate. And for certain, we can see this when we're talking like we are right now through a video camera. It will affect a lot how we should behave, how we should talk, how we would communicate. So it's really worthwhile to look at those different methods, look at these different channels, and discuss a little bit how it will affect how we communicate. In principle, though, the rules of communication is always the same. The things we discussed about in earlier webinars about talking on stage and so on, almost everything we were talking about there still applies here. Of course, you need to be interesting. Of course, you need to make sure that you're understandable. Of course, you need to make sure that you are approachable and etc. All these things, and how you talk and how you present yourself, it all still matters a lot. But let's take a quick look about how sort of the communication online are colored by the fact that they're happening through the internet. And I have to say, there's maybe a couple of things that is worthwhile to think about. First of all, it's a little bit harder to get feedback from people when you're online, let's say, compared to when you are communicating with them directly. This might be obvious, but it's still something that can frustrate us, right? Sometimes you try to connect with somebody and they don't answer you. It's a little bit like sending a message in a bottle and throw it into the ocean and hope that you get some response. Maybe one day you will 20 years later, but in general, these interactions that we have online are more passive. And it's our job to try to find a way to make them more interactive, but it's always going to be a little bit more difficult. People tend to want to stay in back. They want to communicate a little bit less, and also a lot of the common signals that we all share when we're used to when we're communicating in person, they're kind of lost right now. It's hard for me to see how you're reacting, for example, in this environment. So we all have to work a little bit harder. And when it comes to working harder, I think one of the big things that we could do is try to work harder to showcase our personality. So when I meet somebody in real life, it takes me approximately 30 seconds to kind of realize what kind of person they're presenting themselves to be, because there are a million little hints that they give off, just how they stand and how they answer you and respond to you, how they move their face, etc. will tell you a lot about who they are. But through video and online or through text, we don't see these things. We don't see these little signals. So if you want to communicate effectively, you need to do it more exaggerated. You need to make sure that you are doing it very clearly, there is no room for subtleties. You cannot be subtle about these things. You know, you need to be very, maybe a little bit more exaggerated than you're comfortable with. For example, right now, the way I'm talking is not the way that I would maybe talk to you in person. I'm trying to show really clearly how I am feeling about these things, etc. Using my hands and doing other things to really signal this. If you guys would not have this video, only have text, you would even have a lot less room to understand what I'm trying to say. So if I'm writing, I need to be even more clear about what I'm trying to make, how I'm trying to make you feel. So you have to showcase who you are and what you are about in a more direct way. And when we go beyond body language, we need to exaggerate a little bit more. They say there have been research online that talk about, for example, eye contact, and they say when people are communicating through video conferences, there's like 50% less eye contact. And that is true because, you know, you're not really looking at eyes. You're looking somewhere else. This is not an eye. This is a video camera. But eye contact is very, very powerful. So maybe look into the camera and give people the feeling that you're actually talking to them. A little trick might be to put a little smiley face just on top of the camera right here. So you have a feeling you're talking to somebody. Yeah, so like these little things that really matter. You need to figure out, if you cannot do these things in the normal way, how could you substitute these things? And the last point I want to talk about when it comes to online communication is, remember, you are the traffic. What does this mean? I don't know how many people here are used to driving a car, but I guess most of us at least drive a bicycle, right, inside the city, and cars as well. And the traffic can be very, very frustrating. We get angry if there's a big traffic jam and so on. And when there's a big car that goes right in front of you and does something that like offends you, you get angry at them. And the reason for this is because you don't think about traffic as human. Like, you don't think about the other cars as human. They don't have face. They don't have people representing them. You can behave towards them in a way that you would never behave to another human, and you don't give them any empathy because you don't think about them as human. You think about them as these really big metal monsters that go around the road and could kill you. But the funny thing is that they are not monsters. You are traffic. I mean, like, the fact that I'm even there on the road means that I am also one of those people trying to get somewhere, right? So, and other people are probably very frustrated at me for being in the way when they're trying to get somewhere. Why am I talking about this? Because the internet can sometimes feel like this. You don't see the face of the other people. They will say something that without any tone of voice. They will write something. You don't know what they were trying to say or how they were saying it. You don't see their face. You don't know what they were meaning. Maybe they were joking. Maybe they were, trying to hurt you. And normally what happens to us is that we think they're trying to hurt us and we get angry. And that is not very smart. So let's still not forget, this is just, we're all there in the same situation. We're all just humans trying to do our thing. And behind each of these words is a real person. That takes me back to Anna's presentation. She's going to tell us a little bit about one-to-one communication, right, Anna?
Exactly. I think you can see my slide. Yeah. Yes?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, great. It's not going in full screen mode for me. Oh, but yes, now it is. Sorry for that. Okay, yes, I want to talk about online communication one by one. And I'm going to talk especially about sending emails and planning voice calls and video calls. Okay, so where to start? What do you need to pay attention to? For sure, I would say the first thing is the first approach with this person. Make sure you're completely sure about what's the title you need to use. Is this a professor? Is this a president of the institute? Is this an associate? You should just call him or her Mr. or Miss. That really it's the first approach. So it's something very important, both in written and verbal communication. And that helps you make a good first impression. I don't want to say that if you give a bad impression at the beginning, then everything else is just, is going to ruin all the rest. But still, I think first impressions, and again, it depends also in like which culture we're talking about. But first impressions can be important. So better to spend a little bit more time preparing your email or preparing for your call before starting, rather than have to make an extra effort after, because you didn't gain the trust that you could have, because the first impression wasn't the best. Then also you are talking with one person that is based in a specific country and with this in a specific time zone. So it's very kind and could help to always consider and take into account the time difference and holidays. And this applies, I think, to both emails and calls. Why? Because of course I won't leave my phone on in the night, and if you send me an email that is at 3 a.m., I'm going to wake up and read it. But still, it helps get someone's attention, especially if it's the first time, I think, and also, sends, I think, a good vibe if you, for example, schedule an email to be received at when the person enters the office at 8 a.m., or when you're proposing to meet, when you're proposing to set a phone call, to as well consider the working hours. So probably not before 8 or 9 a.m. and not after 4. So by 5 p.m. you're done, or something similar. The same goes with holidays. If you want to ask something to your research group you cooperate with, that is based in Italy, don't do it now. Don't do it today, because they're all thinking of the Easter break, I'm telling you. So if you can, better you wait a few more days, and from Tuesday onwards, you're allowed to do that. And of course, always be polite, and even when you're comfortable with someone else, and be punctual, meaning both try to reply to your emails within a decent amount of time, 1 to 3 days. That's also a cultural thing, but don't wait too long. It's always best to just send a message and say, I'll come back to you in a few days, because work has been hectic, rather than leave it silent. And of course, for calls, and I mean that applies also for a conference call with someone else, especially since there's so many software. You want to be there a few minutes earlier in case you need to download or update. These online platforms can also be big headaches sometimes. So about one-to-one emails, what's the secret? I can give a few tips. First of all, especially if you are approaching an established professor, or anyway someone who is busy at work normally, these people might receive 100 emails per day. Like that's very easy. So you really need to be very clear and very brief. Try not to over communicate, not to bombard anyone with emails, because I think it's very easy to lose patience in this case. You need to be on point, and you need to be able to attract the attention, and you do that in emails starting from the subject line. Never leave it empty, never leave the subject line blank, because first you can go to the spam directly, and you lose the possibility of grasping the attention, that is one of the functions of the subject line, as well as basically summarize what's the content of your email. A perfect subject line is basically a subject line that is able to tell you what's the content, what's the message of the email without even having to open the email. That is the most efficient way to have someone reply to you quickly. Always try to use short sentences. Long sentences can be difficult to read, and then are not efficient in these cases. Be concise and to the point, and as Halldor was saying, be aware that especially with emails, emails rob us from all the voice and the facial expressions and all those like cues that we might have in different forms of communication. So always ask yourself, is this clear emotionally? It is going to be well perceived. Otherwise, maybe it's better to write the message in a different way to make sure that there's no misunderstanding, that no offense might be interpreted because you were too straightforward or too dry in communicating. Practical tips, very practical. So for example, when it comes to regular emails, if you're sending reports every week to your supervisor or similar things, you can add a date or a number of the report in the subject line. That makes it clear at first sight what's the topic. It's the third report. Then you really need to balance here, but if you want to discuss many different topics in your email, you might want to consider to create separate emails for the different topics. I'm saying we need to balance because of course consider not to overload of content your email, but as we said, you don't want to send too many emails, communicate and bombard with many different separate emails. So it's a little bit of a the threshold is it's on you to decide. If you combine content and different topics in one single message, then you want to use bullet points and you want to use paragraphs, maybe with numbers, and even consider maybe to chunk off part of the information to make more compact and more immediate to see, to read, and to understand. Emails are still like kind of like formal way of communications, so unless you really are familiar and friend with the person you're talking to, avoid informal language, jargon, slangs. Emoticons can sometimes be used to clarify a message that might help avoid misunderstandings, but again, when not in the first contact, when you sort of develop a relationship and the person you're writing an email to pretty well. And last point, salutations, final greetings are evolving as the conversation through the emails evolve. So from more formal to less formal, also according to the reply that you get from the person you're talking with. And then let me move quickly to phone calls and video calls. What's the difference when you're planning a one-to-one call compared to emails? I feel they are a little bit more personal. For sure, you have this extra opportunity of expressing yourself because your voice is heard. So that really gives some extra cues on what's your reaction. Most of us were saying online communication, I don't know what's the reaction of the person on the other side. This helps a bit. I also feel that there's more room for a personal presentation and sharing a few more personal aspects if you want and if it's appropriate in a phone call. So you can be more expressive, and you are also able, of course, to adapt through the conversation and according to how the person on the other side is talking to you, the feeling the person is giving you. And if it's a video phone call, it's a video call, then of course there's also facial expressions. Halldor is explaining very well. You need to exaggerate, but you can use your face, your hands, and the little part that is seen in the camera can also communicate something. General tips about planning phone calls: for sure, never call someone out of the blue. You always need to make an appointment. I would say a few weeks in advance, and then maybe confirm, even by a message, a phone message, the day before, or not in the few days before. Adapt your language according to the formality and according to how the other person is talking to you. Always plan to be in a quiet place, book a room somewhere when there's no background noises. And if you have them available, always much better to use earphones or headphones. Another thing that I always do as well when I'm about to start a call is having a glass of wine, no, it's water, I swear, a glass of water next to me, because after a while, then it's, your mouth can be dry, and a notebook, because unlike emails, if you don't take notes, you might forget. So you want to take note of everything that is said, that is important. Always try not to interrupt. It's not like in-person conversation. You really need to wait the other person to finish before starting. Otherwise, it's going to feel rude, and it's not going to be, a fluent conversation. And if a video is implied, always check the light, and that the background is not too messy. You can use a background like the one I'm using, in case you prefer. And so take also into consideration that how you present yourself from visual point of view is important. Okay, so moving back to you, Halldor, for communication to groups.
Yes. All right. So we see the screen now, right, Anna?
Yes.
Okay. So we're gonna move a little bit like from small to big. That was sort of the logical way that we were thinking about this. So communicating one-on-one is sort of the fundamental for every kind of communication. But as we move towards more people, obviously it's gonna change a little bit. And a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about in this part of the webinar today might sound very, let's say, obvious to a lot of you, but I hope like some of these things might be new to some of the people here. So I think it's worthwhile to take a look at, and maybe each of us can learn different things. So one of the big things that I noticed from my Chinese colleagues in the network, the Chinese researchers in EURAXESS, is that they're mostly worried about their language abilities, how they speak. And this, I think, is something that matters a lot, obviously, but it maybe matters a little bit less than you might think. So just as an example, inside of Europe, not everybody speaks English fluently. I'm not a native English speaker myself, and most people in Europe are not excellent English speakers, but it's maybe not always about how you talk. It's about sort of a little bit of the other things. So I want to go back a little bit to the email. And when you move to a larger group of people, you are going in your email communication, you are going to encounter new, let's say, challenges. You're probably going to be dealing with a lot of people that you don't know very well, and a lot of strangers, etc., and formalities and so on certainly start to matter a lot. And there are a couple of basic rules that I think is worth to mention. And one of the things that I think is interesting to note here is that, in my experience, email communication is different in China from how it's in Europe. It's not better or worse, it's just different. It's people do it a lot differently, how they write their emails. And a lot of the times also people are using other channels like WeChat and so on to communicate. Almost all communication that are on any formal level in Europe would be going through email. That's just how it is. And people expect a certain type of emails when they are talking to somebody that they don't know so far. And they're also really careful because emails are totally open platform. Anybody can send anything to anybody. You don't need to be invited. You need to know somebody's email, but if you know it, you can try to contact them. And it doesn't matter if you're using Apple or if you're using Windows or if you're using a phone or a computer or if you're in China or in America or Europe. It doesn't matter. Anybody can use an email. So email ends up being this method that a lot of people use, at least when they're beginning, when you need like the lowest denominator that everybody can understand. So you're definitely going to have to use the email, and it really matters that you do it in the right way, because we are also very careful, because there's a lot of bad things that go through email. A lot of spam, and people try to cheat you, etc., etc. So people might not be, and also people get so many emails that they don't answer all the emails that they get. I mean, like, I get way too many emails to be able to always answer everything. It needs to be something that really, deserves to be answered, and that's not always the case. So more than once, more than twice, well, a lot of times, I've had a Chinese colleague come to me and ask me, why is this professor in Europe not answering my emails? And I just need to look at their email once, and I can tell them. It's because when the professor got this email, he didn't believe this was a real person. That is the reason why they're not answering your email. Is because they look at it and they think this is not a real person. It's nothing to do with how you speak, by the way. It's not your language ability that they're being bothered with. It's just they look at it and it looks like spam, and they ignore it. They don't even read it. And so it's really like worthwhile to think about what we could do. Just a very simple thing we could do to prevent this. And number one thing that I want to mention is just, I mean, like, okay, look at this. This is a made up email I just created right now, but I get like 6 or 7 emails a week that are kind of written like this. Nothing wrong with it, like, yeah, it's not perfect English, etc., etc. It's from a long number at qq.com, and it's all like squashed together in this way, and there's no like name under it. I have no idea who's sending this email, and believe me, I receive these kind of emails all the time. Sometimes I see them in like side by side, in like they're started by Chinese and then translate their emails, and I can see, oh, this actually sounds very nice in Chinese, but when you kind of put it into English in this way, it feels like a spam email. And I'm used to it, but maybe people in Europe wouldn't be. So I just want to show you, like, really quickly how I could change this. I did not change any of the language, by the way. It's all the same. It's exactly the same language. The number one thing I did was that I added some space in between. And I think there could be, like splitting your text into paragraphs is a very good way to look like a more professional. I think if you don't know exactly how to do paragraphs, a good rule of thumb is just 3 paragraphs. Almost 90% of all emails are going to be 3 paragraphs. There's going to be number 1. There's going to be, what you kind of see how you want to start this. Number 2, there's going to be sort of your question or your request or what you want. And number 3, some sort of nicety, like some way to be polite, and space between. Perfectly fine. Another big difference between this email and the first one is also the email address. So I know that a lot of people here in China have a QQ email address. But if you are approaching somebody in Europe representing an institution, let's say a Peking University or something like that, these institutions definitely have email addresses, and you probably already have them. Use your institution's email address, because that will guarantee you get an answer. If they see that it's .pgu, like pgu.edu.cn, professors in Europe or whoever will answer that. They will not answer something at qq.com, because especially if it's a long number, they will just feel like this is fake. And this is like some kind of a cheat. And also I added a little bit of how do you say, like your name at the bottom and your title and from which institution you are. Like these 3 things will really help. Exactly the same email, but just change it a little bit and it will really help. Okay, so now you have started communicating through an email, and now you're in this big email communication. I'm currently myself involved in like 6 of those, like there's like literally 20 people there in CC. So CC means carbon copy. It means you answer somebody, normally one person that sends it and you answer them, but there's like 20 other people that can copy into the email. And the big thing here is like how to behave in this situation. And I think number 1 thing is just to remember who to CC. Don't CC everybody in your company. This happens all the time. Try to really only put in copy people that really have something about this conversation. A good rule of thumb is like anybody that needs to know what's going on and be able to follow this for their own information, etc. Maybe your boss or somebody under you, your secretary or something like that. They should be in CC, nobody else. Keep people out of the CC if it don't need to be there. Then keep it linear. So what does that mean? If somebody is, if there's a back and forth and people are answering and somebody else answers a chain email, don't go and answering some email from 1 week ago, because you want to be able to see all the answers in the logical line below it. This is what you want to be able to do. And then things get complicated, because maybe in the history of this email, a lot of people have been saying different things, and you're going to comment on some of those things. Now you need to be very clear what you're commenting on. You need to make sure that you're addressing the specific people. I sometimes just use an @ signal and say, this person here, here's what I think. And I make sure to reference what I'm trying to talk about. And then please try to stay on topic, because these emails are, like a very strenuous way that affect a lot of people, and there's not necessary to use them for something else. If you want to start talking about something new, maybe create a new email, and you might redefine a little bit who is going to be involved. If it's about something new, not everybody needs to be involved. And then only send meaningful responses. There's nothing more annoying than somebody says something, and then there's like 17 answers that all say you like thank you or yes or something, because you can say that in a private email to the answer, but don't put that into the email chain if necessary. So I guess I would say maybe 70% of you guys are already doing a lot of email stuff, so you know all of this. But if you are for the first time participating in something like this, I hope this was useful. So we move away from this, and we kind of go beyond what Anna was talking about earlier about video calls. And when you're in a video call and you have more people involved, there are several things that you might want to consider. One of it, for example, is to don't eat when you're talking to people, like I just did right now. I don't know how natural that looked to you guys, but I was trying to make a point. It's not nice when people are eating in a big video calls, etc. It might work if you're just having a video phone call with somebody, one person is like yeah, and you have like a sip of water or eat something. But now it's a meeting, right? You're in front of a lot of people. Don't be dignified. Make sure that you're behaving in the same way that you would if you're meeting them in a cafe somewhere. I know a lot of you are just at home and you feel comfortable, and that's great, but it is a little bit different. So also, if you're in like a video call, let's say 10 people, keep your video on. I'm not saying everybody here needs to keep the video on, but in a small group, like, because this is a webinar with how many people? Like 90 something. But if it will only be 10 people, I think everybody should keep the video on, because obviously video meetings, smaller meetings like this, is to create like sort of a team conversation. And when people are not, I don't have the video on, they don't really feel like they're being present. Also, a good thing is to master the mute button. I have certainly in the last year with all these video calls sometimes failed with that. You forget it is on and you start to type something. This happened to me earlier in this webinar, and I just, oh fuck yeah, like Anna is talking and there's typing. I should have muted myself. So just mute yourself if somebody else is talking. But then you start talking later yourself and you forget to unmute yourself and nobody can hear you. So this is something that just needs to be thought about. And another thing, if you're having a meeting, and this is something that the EURAXESS team does a lot, we're having meetings with each other and with people from other EURAXESS team and all over the world, with people in Brussels and so on. Sometimes you want to be communicating something together. And then you might kind of prepare a little bit how you want to switch between speakers. People, there's not going to be any, because of the lack of the internet, there's not going to be any natural time for the other person to start talking. So you might need to prepare, like after I say this, I will kind of say this, and you know that now it's your turn to say something. And this way you can kind of build up a joint communication strategy when you're talking online. And if there's a lot of people, there's also a really good idea just to have an agenda. Know who's going to be speaking when and what. And a moderator is always a good idea. Somebody that's sort of in charge, especially if there's going to be open questions, to decide who's going to speak next and so on. Figure out who wants to talk. Maybe people can like ask for the word, like in the chat box, or by putting their hands up or something like that. And then also for all video meetings and conferences, it's smart to make sure that you've prepared technically beforehand. Obviously, this is something we all know. If you don't prepare technically with your slides and connecting your screen and so on, it will fail. It always does. It just always does. If you didn't prepare it, it will. And especially if you're doing something for the first time, using a new software and so on. And then I'm going to go to a even bigger scale, which it would be like webinars. This is what we're doing here today. We have like maybe hundreds of people listening to what you're saying. And then you have to interact with a lot of people simultaneously. And of course, what happens is that the more people you're talking to, the less interaction that's going to be happening. It's going to be more anonymous. I don't know how many people kept their video on today, but I think maybe 3 people. Everybody else just turns their video off. And it's more like going into a big lecture hall and talking to a big group of people from a stage, right? When you're in a webinar, that's the feeling. And that is fine. That is the point. You might want to get some interaction, but you will always interact with the group. You will do something like Anna did at the beginning and do like a polling where you can interact with everybody at the same time. And you might need to prepare the slides that you want to share. This is something that starts to get very important. Most webinars are organized around some kind of presentation. And at this point, you might also want to make sure you're looking into the camera correctly, that you have a quiet place with good lighting and simple background and all of these things. So from there, I'm going to move to the next level, which is reaching mass audience. And this is something that Anna is going to be talking about mostly, but I wanted to start with maybe a few tips. The big thing that we want to be introducing today is like, how do you reach out to a lot of people online? And you can do this, for example, by preparing videos. And videos are really, knowing how to do videos today is just super, super useful skill. And I don't expect a lot of people here to be that good at it. It's just not something that most people learn. And people might have wrong ideas how that works, but there are actually very, very simple practical tips that you could really help you out. And this is the first one that I want to make. The audio is the most important part of the video. You might think you might want to buy a super expensive camera, but honestly, audio is so much more important than the camera. You can have a really shitty camera, but the super good quality audio, like the sound, and it's going to be fine. It can help out and it will look more professional. But if you have a really nice camera, but the sound sounds horrible, it will immediately feel very, very, let's say, unprofessional. I mean, honestly, the video, even if I have a really good video, most of the time when you're communicating online, it's going to get compressed so much that you won't even see the quality and the resolution and whatever, but you will always notice the sound. So if you want to do anything to make your videos better, is to make your sound better. So I want to suggest that you might consider microphone, like get an external microphone. The microphones that are inside your phone or inside of your laptop are not made for this. They're made for like phone calls. They sound tinny and echoey and very shallow, and they're just not good. So you could do a lot of things. You could get an external mic, something like this. This is the Shure SM558 that I own. It's like $100, and that is really, really nice. But one thing that if you want to buy a mic, almost every mic, you cannot just connect it to a laptop. It doesn't work. you need something that connects it with the laptop, takes that audio signal and connects it to a laptop. To do that, you need something called an audio interface, which is like a little computer. You can see it here in the picture. It's like a red little box. And it gets complicated if you don't know anything about audio. So I just don't want to prevent somebody buying this, for example, and thinking they can connect it, because that's the mistake that I did. And you cannot do it this way. But there are a couple of ways that you can try to find like microphones that can connect directly to a phone, for example, and you can find them on Taobao. And some of them could be very cheap, like 100 kwai. And no, they're not high quality, but they're going to be a lot better than whatever your phone has. So for example, I just bought this last week, and it's like a clip-on. You put it here, and you can hear me okay. And these microphones could cost like $1,000, but I bought them for 100 kwai, on Taobao. And I feel like they're perfectly fine. They're so much better. When you put the microphone here, they're gonna take away all the other sound, only focus on your voice. It's gonna be very, very a lot better. So that was my first point, because this is the easiest thing to fix. It's like getting a sound, like buy something just a little bit and you could make it so much better immediately. Then some basic editing tips. So I'm not gonna, that could be like a whole course to talk about editing. Some people have a university degree in video editing and so on. I'm not talking about people here should become like VFX artists, like virtual effects, visual effects masters. The point is just like to know a little bit about editing. There's a lot of different software you could use, and but knowing like all the software goes by the same rules. I think maybe the like couple of things that really helped me to think about this. Number one was to know the difference between what's called an A roll and B roll. So you might do something like I'm doing right now, and you're talking to a camera, and this is called like A roll. This is like the normal, most basic thing that you're doing. But then you might want to put something on top of that. Maybe a picture of a tree, because I'm talking about the environment. So you want to have a video of some forest or something. This is called B-roll. And when you start thinking about that, even the most basic videos can become better, because you're thinking about what you're saying and also what you're going to be kind of how you want to illustrate it. You can collect B-rolls anywhere, and it doesn't need to be because there's no sound necessarily connected to the B-roll. You could just be recording it with your phones. Most phones today have a good enough video camera. So you could be going around and taking pictures from university or somewhere of a crowd or whatever, and collecting B-roll to use in your videos. If you don't have a video that you really want, you could also just find stock footage. There are some free ones online, like Paxel.com, or you could just buy it. It's not super expensive. It depends on the production quality you're going for. And you might want to find the right software. I know that here in China, there's a lot of good software. There's also a lot of basic software you could like download. I've even edited videos in apps and so on. It doesn't really matter. I myself, I use Adobe Premiere, which is not for free. There's another one that's like the best one that I know about that is for free. It's called DaVinci. It's actually a professional quality editing software. But more professional is not also means more difficult. So you might not want to go directly for that. Then I want to just talk a little bit about live streaming, because this is something that I think is already becoming really big, and it's going to be definitely even bigger in the future. And live streaming is an excellent way, especially if you want to start to do podcasts and other things that I'm not going to discuss. This is something that we in EURAXESS are trying to do more, and I think in the future everything is going to be like this. So here's several basic concepts to just consider. When I was learning about it, it was a big revelation. So first of all, how to say, you might have the best internet connection in your whole building, and you could still not live stream to everybody in the world. You might be able to send a video to one person in really good quality, but if you have two people, now you need twice as good internet connection. So what if you have 2,000 people? You're going to be screwed, right? So what we do need is that we need some kind of streaming platform to work with. In Europe, we could be working with YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, Periscope. Here in China, we have things like Bilibili, and now a lot of people are using Douyin and other platforms like this. There's a lot of good ones here in China also. So this is the first thing you need to consider. But then when you're connecting whatever video that you're preparing and broadcasting to those platforms, how do you do that in a nice way? For example, let's say that you have like two different people talking on through Zoom or something. How would you do this? So there's a software called OBS, which is totally for free, but all the professionals use it. And I think it's so good. It's so easy. You create different scenes and you can put things into there and switch between it. And then you just connect it to your streaming platform. I encourage you to consider considering using that. And just learn how to use it. It's definitely going to be useful at some point if you're thinking about mass outreach. And then maybe the last thing I want to mention is that if you're thinking about connecting to one platform, let's say Douyin, but you also want to connect to more than one at the same time, you cannot do that unless you have some kind of one point that you first connect to and then splits the signal to a lot of people. And we use here at EURAXESS, we use Restream.io, but there are other services like that. It's not about teaching you how to do this, but rather that you know what are the main challenges and so on. And then the final point I want to say that about practical stuff when it comes to these videos and streaming and so on, how to write a video script. So this is going to be a little bit different from writing a normal. I know everybody here today are quite good at writing. They've probably written a lot of articles and theses and so on about their science and scientific endeavors, but video scripts are different. So first of all, you know, I encourage you to keep it simple. When it comes to video, they feel a lot longer for what you want to say. So like a 10-minute video is just going to be able to contain maybe one or two main points. It cannot really talk about a lot more in that time. It's just how it is. And just try to make sure that you don't go past 125 words per minute. I mean, like even that is a lot. So just like just keep it even shorter. Try to make the pictures speak for themselves. Try to make the videos talk, and you say a little bit less. Use a story, a narrative, and to be able to convey what you're trying to say. And another thing that I found was really good is like try to think about it in blocks of maybe 10 to 15 seconds, and then you kind of break it up with maybe some kind of video or whatever, and then you go to the next block. This is also a good way that I've learned. And then I also put up here a little example how you can write a video script in a very basic way. One of the big things that you might want to consider is that you're not only looking at the audio, like what people are saying, the script, but also the visual, what is going to be shown at the same time. So you might be talking about like, you start with a voice and there's a talking head, and then there's maybe a music, maybe you want to add that as well, and it's starting slowly. And then when you start to talk about some topic like the environment, there's suddenly a video of a forest, right? But the voice continues like before. But you might, if you're really good with this, you might suddenly realize, oh, here would be a good point to make the music become more inspirational or something like that. So maybe you want to change the music, or if you're really good, you might pick music that at the right point becomes a little bit better. And this is always very fun. And when that happens, you're like, oh, the music changed at the same time. That is always amazing and well done. So like these sort of things is what make writing a video really fun. So this is only the beginning. I thought this was very kind of interesting practical things that you start with. But now Anna will go through some of the additional point in mass audience reach.
Thank you, Halldor. It was actually very interesting, and especially for someone that is maybe like starting from scratch, it's always very good to have this kind of advices, even like which software to use, how easy or elaborated to start from. So I'm going to continue giving some more tips about how what to care about, what to look at when you want to start creating your own videos. So we said this many times already, also in apply to calls and other things. Lighting is very important. So first thing, everybody should know when thinking of creating a video is you don't need anything really special. You can really make a nice video even with your phone. You need to have a good idea in your mind, and the main light needs normally to be at 10 or 2 o'clock. I think you can maybe see now that I have a light, artificial light in this case, here at my 2 o'clock, but it can be a natural light from a window. Of course, there's a balance. You don't want too much light, so that the person becomes blinded and you don't see anything else in the back in your video, and you don't want it to be too dark. The background, we also mentioned it, is important because it needs to be pretty clean so it doesn't get anyone distracted. If well, in many situations, it's a good idea is to have a background with bookshelves, like we saw Vanessa. She was looking like very nice and professional with all these like beautiful, colorful books in the back, or maybe some plants or a piece of artwork. It needs to be maybe like one piece of art or a plant on your side. Always make sure that there's not a bunch of untidy things behind yourself. Maybe also something personal that shows a little bit more about your work or yourself. It's a good idea for a background. Then third element that is very important, framing. So the first question is framing landscape mode or portrait mode. Normally, what's best in general, what is recommended is landscape mode. So, if you have your phone, this is portrait mode, this is landscape mode. And that's because most screens show video in that format. But for example, there are some social media like Facebook and Instagram in the West that always also have the portrait mode option. Then I should mention the rule of thirds. What is that about? You can see my slide, this picture with this lady, and there's a grid on the picture. This grid is something that is very easy also to have on your phone. You just need to go to the settings, and you can basically just set it so that whenever you take a picture or whenever you take a video, you have this grid. What's the meaning of having this grid? Is because to have a nice video, you want the person, the subject of your video, to normally be at the with eyesight and height of the camera on this, like you see the above line of the grid, and you want also it to be basically between or along the two vertical lines. You want the person to be in this range of your frame, and where is best, and what's best to do, to always look directly in the camera or look somewhere else. Well, that depends on your goal. What we suggest, not we suggest, but I think in general, what is suggested by experts is that if it comes to a pitch, if it comes to a short direct address to the audience, an address of a leader to the population, a short one that wants to be impactful, then it's better that the subject, the person, is in the middle on the first line of our grid, and then in the middle of the two vertical ones, looking in the camera. That is more impactful. While if you want a more intimate situation, give an idea that is a conversation. For example, is something that me and Halldor do when we're having our video casts. So more informal conversation where two people, the two of us, talk from different places. Well, there you want to be like as you can see the lady in the picture, maybe, and not looking into the camera but looking off camera, because that shows that you are having a conversation with someone else who is in a different place, and that gives more intimate, more friendly atmosphere, and is also better when it's longer conversation, or for a documentary, or yeah, for an interview, for example. Then you must know that normally around 80% of the videos that are watched muted. This means that you always want to add subtitles to your videos to make sure that the message is received. To add subtitles, there are some softwares. They're able to do it for you in hundreds of different languages. And one that we can suggest is HappyScribe, but there are different options out there. Some of the softwares that Halldor mentioned, and also others, also make it very easy for you to add subtitles yourself. And some platforms like YouTube, I think, can do it automatically. So it's not such a tough and long job as it might seem at the beginning. And then especially when talking about videos for interviews, and some final tips. Always make sure that you are on place and setting your camera or your phone and checking the lighting and the background in advance. If you're booking a room, do it 30, 60 minutes in advance so you're going to be comfortable. Always start with a test shot, because interviews might be repeated multiple times, right? So you don't want your researcher, your talent, to do it even just one extra time, just because you forgot to set something, and like you started your recording forgetting about the test shot. And also very important not to lose your job. As soon as you're done, upload the work on the cloud, so you're safe and you don't risk to lose everything. Moving on from videos to web writing, and writing when it comes to, for example, blogs and articles, they are not scientific. Well, first of all, you always need to start from asking yourself the question of why. Why are you writing? You're writing to inform, to persuade of something, to prompt a response, like a call of action. Why are you writing? Because that's really the starting point to make your article and your blog post or what is that you're doing meaningful. Then CAB, clarity, accuracy, and brevity. Always keep in mind these 3 words. They also say that the best way to write about something is the simplest way you can find. So very simple, very short, especially online, since there's so many sources, so much material, is even more important that normally to keep it short, to make short sentences and short paragraphs. They are very direct at first sight. Also, related to this, it is suggested often not to use italics, for example, because it's not very easy, it's not well perceived by our eyes when reading articles on the web. The inverted pyramid, you see it on my slide here. So the questions you should reply to, and that should take the most part of your article, and the base of your pyramid is like who, what, when, why, where, and how of your stories. These are the most informative element that should raise the interest in the reader. Then important details, of course, you don't want to leave anything vague. You want to be specific to be interesting. You don't want general information and the general background information to be preponderant in your article. Of course, you see they are as well on the bottom of the pyramid, but that is on the side compared to the rest. Then always try in writing non-scientific articles to avoid Latin words, to avoid cliche buzzwords and throwaway words. So all those expressions like it goes without saying, or has already stated, or $1 one day, all these form of expressions that basically don't communicate any relevant information must be avoided, again, because you want to be specific. You don't want to add any extra word that is not significant to your article. And then, of course, there are different formats, and there are also a lot of templates you can look at online, depending what you're writing, if it's a press release, if it's your blogging, or is more journalistic article. And then you see, like on the right side of my slide, how to write stories that sing. So these are the components and that should be followed when writing, when you want to write a catchy story. Starting from a catchy headline, I think someone was saying also earlier, it's so important to have a catchy headline. It's so important to have a good subject line in emails. And it's not easy to do that. Yeah, it's not. I guess we all need to, train a lot. But yeah, well-chosen word that needs to catch the attention and then needs to summarize what's the content. Then there's the first part that can be called stem first, chapeau, or lead. That is a sort of summary, an introduction of what the article is going to be about. The kick is the first few paragraphs, so a good portion of your story. Context, so general information, and putting your story in a wider background. Quotes that needs to substantiate what you're saying and make it more meaningful, and at the conclusion that can be rounded up as you need. You can always when you want to improve, write also a short summary at the end of your article, and also ask your readers for feedback. That's I think something that is doesn't cost you basically any big effort, but can be very, very useful to improve. Then final point that I want to touch in this part of communications with the mass audience is podcasting. So podcasts, I think, are in general less used still at the moment, even if they are becoming more popular. So it's a kind of area that might be less competitive and less crowded than, for example, blogging. What to do when you want to start thinking of planning to have your own podcast? Well, first of all, you need to choose the topic and the name. I would start from those. Topic, how to choose a topic. Of course, it needs to be, a niche. Something that is not possibly already touched by a lot of people, but as well, it needs to be broad enough for you to be able to speak about it for many episodes, 100. And you can always adapt it and enlarge it when your audience grows and as time passes. But you want to start from something that is a little bit, niche, a little bit specific. The name, on the other side, I think can be a bit broader because it needs to include all the different topics, all the different episodes you're going to talk about, and it still needs to be coherent in case you want to expand a little bit from the original niche. We were talking about microphones, right? If you wanna run a podcast, you definitely need a very good microphone. Audio is just essential, is what it is in a podcast. Even even more important than in videos, of course. You might want to consider to have a co-host to start. That can, make it like more natural if you're having, different views on the same topic. And I think especially the beginning can help you, prevent potential awkward moments of silence. And of course, you need to define what is the episode's format you want. I think something that is very popular recently is like having interviews, but you can always just decide to be solo or with your co-host and invite interviewees sometimes. For sure, you might want to consider when you start to have someone to interview, because I think that helps a lot in terms of growing your audience, especially if you interview someone that is, I wouldn't say famous, but has his own network related to the topic he's expert into and he's going to talk about. So if he spreads voice about your podcast, that might be an easy way to enlarge your audience. And so talking about the format, maybe something you don't need to worry about too much is the length of your podcast. There's people saying that it shouldn't be longer than 28 minutes because that's the average commuting time of people. So that's when like how long they can pay attention to your podcast. But finally, it looks that everything that stays between 20 and 45 minutes, it's good. And anyway, I guess the most important element to decide what's the length of your podcast is solely the content. So never cut out good content because you think that the episode might be longer, or don't just put in the trash an episode that is short just because it's short, because it might still be interesting. So that's what I could suggest about the length. And of course, another important element is the schedule and how often to have a podcast. Probably is the best schedule is just as often as you are available to organize it, depending on the different topics and the time that it requires. So the more often, the best. And you can always consider to organize it, the structure it in different seasons. So every season might have 6, 10, 12 episodes and is on a different theme. And after that, you can take 1 month, 2 months break to rearrange your ideas, recollect your energies, and start with a new thematic. And so this is the last point of and the last way that we wanted to talk about when reaching mass audience. And I'll switch back to Halldor again.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. You said podcast should be 25 minutes because it's the average length of commuting. I suggest 1 hour because that's the average length of me going to the gym. I think that's the perfect time. No, but I think podcast is such an interesting way, and all these methods we're talking about today all speak to what we were saying in the first webinar. Why are we even doing science communication? A lot of you want to further your own career, and we are stuck in a system of publishing and journals and et cetera, et cetera. But this is like a little bit like hacking that system, just like going past it. I have a friend who has studied the history of China. He created a podcast about history of China in Icelandic, in my home country. It's a tiny country. But who do you think is the biggest expert now in everybody's opinion about history of China? This guy. It's not necessarily because he knows most, but everybody knows that he knows a lot. So it's really great. And if you like history of China, you're going to find this podcast. It's just like that. And a lot of good things, like the embassy likes it and of China, and everybody likes this. So a podcast can be a really interesting way to just like say, do your own thing, and establish yourself as an expert. And all of you already have a topic to discuss, which is your research or something similar to that. Maybe it's astronomy. If it's too big, you can combine two things. Maybe it's astronomy in China. Probably no podcast about that already, not in English at least. So I think it's a really cool thing to consider. I have to excuse ourselves a little bit. So for all the things that we discuss about, you have to keep it simple and you have to be short and so on, I have to admit our webinar has not been very short so far. It's already been 1.5 hours, but I think I can promise you now that we are kind of getting it all together. This is sort of like the conclusion. We want to encourage all of you to use what you've learned throughout all of these webinars to create a 10-minute video science slam. And this will be a little bit like a test for you to see if you can apply the things that you've learned, and also a little bit of a way to actually do the things that you're doing. It's nice. If you want to make a podcast, that's even better. But at least this is like a little thing that you could do now. And if you want the diamond certificate, this is also something that you need to do there. And as an additional bonus, if you will do a 10-minute science slam on a video, you will be we will give you feedback and tell you what we think and what you can make better and so on, making this training hopefully even more valuable than it already has been. So I want to just end today's webinar by talking a little bit about the video slams and how they look like. In general, there are 5 different things that we use as a criteria to evaluate how good a science slam is. So science slam is a 10-minute presentation about your research that's interesting to people that are not expert in the field. That's a science slam. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. And I will show you some examples. So in general, like I said, there are 5 criteria. When we are doing the science slam in real life, we will give 0 to 5 points for each of these 5. So if you're 100% good, you'll get 25 points in total. And if you're like horrible, which is I think impossible, I think nobody can be absolutely horrible, you would get 0, right? But this is also the same method that we will use when we will go over your video slam. So let's talk about it a little bit. The first thing that I want to mention is the first science slam criteria, which is accessibility. So when you will send us your video slam, we will look at it and we will try to determine how accessible we think it is. So what does that mean? Is the presentation easy to understand even for a non-expert? So I think this is number 1 mistake most people make. They are so used to talk about like their brain surgery new product, and they will use all the words and the things that they normally use when they're at their institution or university, but nobody else will understand. And that means that's not a good science slam. Even though the science is good, if you cannot make it understandable to other people, it's not good. So I put here a little bit of a video clip, a little loop of my good friend, Dr. Vikas Malik, who was the winner of Science Slam in China in 2015. He's this guy that was doing his PhD at Guangzhou Chinese Academy of Sciences when it came to cell biology and genomics. And he was doing a lot of things with like CRISPR-Cas9, if you know that, trying to editing genes and something like this. And this is not easy, and most people have no idea what that is, what that's all about. And he created like this science slam, which was called Rational Engineering of Proteins for Cell-Phase Chains. And I have no idea what that means. But after going through our training, he changed it. And he called it the Lord, it was called the Fate of the Cell, Lord of the Rings style. So basically, he talked about how the cell can change and using certain methods, but he used the story of Lord of the Rings, which a lot of people know, to explain it like a little bit like an adventure. And this was not difficult for people to understand. And he is so smart. He knows his subject field really well. He was able to do it and combine it in a way that is not totally ridiculous. And this made him really successful. And he won it in the end. He's now actually just went to New York. He's working at Columbia right now in Manhattan. So really excellent guy. Is doing really well. Another Science Slam criteria, number 2, is the presentation style. So is the Science Slammer, is the presenter engaging or entertaining? Is it fun to listen to him? Is it interesting? Does the slam have like a clear structure, or is the timing good? Like, this presentation style is also very important. It's not only important to, make it accessible, you also need to make it interesting. If it's understandable but not interesting, people just lose interest immediately. So here I have an example of our first Science Slam winner from 2013. And he was talking about reclamation of waterlands. And the way that he did it was that he created a song, and he sung for us. What a wonderful world. And then he made his own lyrics and so on. And I was not actually in EURAXESS at that time, but you can see that he was very, very successful. Dr. Yu Yang from Wuhan University managed to win the Science Slam and catch everybody's attention using his presentation style. And I hope that you will have time when you create your own video slams to go through what we're saying today again. And you can also connect it a little bit to the things we've been studying throughout the webinar so far. So I've written here in the corner a little bit about what you can use from our training so far to help out with each criteria. For example, when it comes to presentation style, you could go back to webinar 1. You can look at how to spruce up your slides, how to let your enthusiasm shine through. But you could also look at the webinar 2 when Miss Lina was talking about stage skills and posture and speaking, etc. All of these things are very, very important. Then the third criteria out of 5 is creativity. So this is something like okay, so you have a good, interesting slam, and you have a very good way to talk about it, but maybe there's more people than you. They're all doing this really well. Then we have to start to look into the details, who is actually more engaging and more successful at communicating. And being more creative, being less boring is always better. So how original is your slam and your way to communicate? This is something that we give a score from 0 to 5. And we will, when you send your slam, we will also use the criteria of creativity to give you some feedback. I have here an example of the winner of the Science Slam here in China from 2016. This is at the Embassy of the European Union. And this is Miss Meng Xiaotong. And she was talking about cancer detection using black phosphorus. So it's very, technical term. She's like a student in biophotonics at Laser Engineering Institute of Beijing University of Technology. At least she was back then. She's actually now in London doing her PhD. But the way that she talked about it like black magic. And she said she is the magician, and she dressed up like a magician. And she also painted all these different paintings to talk about an adventure and how she was doing it and so on. Very, very creative. Definitely more creative than the rest of the people. And she was also very successful. I mean, like, we don't decide to win the Science Slam. It's the people in the room who give the score. And those people are normally not scientists from their field. So you need to be able to catch them. And all these people that we're talking about today manage to catch the audience attention. And it's not enough to be just good at one thing. You need to be good at all 5 things. So she was good at creativity, but she would not have won, because she also had a good presentation style. And she also had, had a very interesting presentation, etc. So the 4th criteria is actually interest. So how much how interesting is the topic presented. So like this is a little bit a flexible thing, right? Because interest can be subjective, and anything can be interesting, right? But you can, this is kind of your job to make sure that people realize how interesting something is. You know, you might think it's very boring or something, and then nobody will believe you that it's interesting. But if you don't think, if you think it's very fascinating, you have this opportunity to let people know how fascinating it is. And I have here an example of Dr. Wang Yanting, who won the Science Slam here in China in 2014. We had our Science Slam up in Udako at that point. And she was this doctoral student from Peking University doing like molecular mechanisms. And she was looking at opiate addictions, right? So she created like this slam around the story of addiction, using a lot of videos and things to make it interesting. And she won the Science Slam because everybody in that room thought that was interesting. And finally, I want to go to the last Science Slam criteria, which is number 5, the scientific value. So I was just talking to the science counselor of the German embassy the other day, and she said to me, oh, you know, these science slams are so fun every time, but some of them, you don't know if it's actually really good science, right? It's just, maybe they're just good at talking. And that is true, but we still think communication is very important, right? Because if you have really good science, you need to have a good way to communicate that. But we should not forget the science part. So the 5th part and the last part, but not the least important part, is the scientific value. Is whatever is being discussed interesting? You know, is it something that has been done before or not? Is it something that has a lot of impact or not? Is the science good or not? And normally in the Science Slam, we might have a lot of people that are not from your field, but normally there are scientists themselves just from other fields. So they have like a sense of this, if the science is good or not. So I think having a good science to talk about is really good. I put here as an example Dr. Chung Tung, who won the Science Slam in 2018 when we did it in Zhongguancun. And he was talking about biofuels when it comes to aviation and, you know, and airplanes, and using biofuels. And it's such an interesting, important topic that in the middle of his slam, the very high leader from the European Union just had like questions and wanted to start asking him about the science, because the people in the European Union is also studying this a lot, and they want to know what this guy was like studying, and thought it was really interesting science that he had to offer. Of course, if he only had a very interesting science to offer, he would not have won. He was also with excellent presentation style, etc., etc. And all the other factors were really good. But that was definitely one of the big reasons why he was successful, because he is doing really interesting science. So that definitely doesn't help. So these are the 5 criterias. Maybe you can take a look at the slides later to take a look at them again. If you have any questions about them, you can send it into the video group and we can talk about it a little bit more. You can now start to prepare your 10-minute Science Slam video that you will send us after the course is over. We're not quite over yet, though. We still have one more webinar that is going to take place next Thursday, 1 week from now. This is going to be the last one. And who else is going to be our trainer but Dr. Chung Tung Chong himself? Oh, and he's actually a great guy, and I'm really looking forward to that. He's going to come and share his experience with doing a Science Slam before. But besides the Science Slam, he's also a really great science communicator. He does this a lot in a lot of different environments. I've done it with a lot of different in a lot of different situations, and surely has a lot of good tips to this group here about how to become a good science communicator. So that's it for me today. I think Anna is still with me somewhere there.
Yes, Halldor, thank you very much. Yeah, we are running a bit long today, I must say. But since I see a lot of us are still connected, let me move quickly, because I want to continue and test the attention of our audience today, and especially of those who said that they really have become experts in online communication because of COVID. No, I'm just kidding. But just give me 2 minutes. That is the same QR code and same link of before. So if you need to scan it again, please do. And we have a very quick last few questions that I would like to see your answers to. So okay, I hope you had the time to scan, and now I'm going to share the results. Let's see. Okay, so the question is, at the appropriate stage, the necessary steps will be taken and sufficient funds committed. This sentence is to you interesting, specific, vague, informative. Probably there's like yeah, there's always like space for interpretation, but this connects to especially the web writing part. So always try to substantiate what you write. You can transform this sentence, specify which stage, stage one is going to be, what are going to be the steps to be taken, how much funding is expected to be committed. So I agree with most of what most of you replied to. Then a quick question about framing and about videos during interviews. So which one, the one to the left or the one to the right, is good for an impactful and short pitch? The guy to the left looking in the camera, or the one to the right who is looking off camera? And but I can't see. Sorry, this is my mistake, because I can't see your questions. So they're hidden by the pictures. But anyway, I'm going to tell you, we think it's the one to the left, because you want to be impactful. A pitch is short. You want to look direct the audience in their eyes and grab their attention. Was today's training informative? We want a feedback from you. Was it useful? Did we say only things that you already knew, they are banal? Or very informative, 5 of you. So
polite.
that is quite satisfying. But
Polite
you know, like from the question from the beginning, I think we felt a lot of pressure, because most of you said that, you know, they found that you already found yourself in international interacting with international partners, and you know, especially since COVID, I guess there has been really a strong push on online communications. So I'm really quite happy that a good part of you are saying very informative, even if you know, you were not out of completely like completely, how do you say that, completely out of knowledge. So that's I think that's pretty satisfying for us. Okay, so Halldor, I think we can close it here.
Yeah,
I don't think we received any special question that I missed during the webinar. So someone is asking about the deadline for the 10 minutes pitch, the 10 minutes slam. I think we haven't said it yet. Maybe we're gonna send out more specific information about it. I think at this point you can start preparing, and there's no specific deadline, so take your time.
So,
and okay,
so
yeah,
about
go ahead.
So there's a question about, will you select the best 10-minute presentation this year? And so basically there's going to be a science slam this year at the second half of the year, and everybody that will send in a video slam for this webinar will be automatically considered for the science slam this year. So if you do a really nice science slam presentation for this webinar, the best 5 might get an invitation to come to the science slam later in the year to come. We will give like a accommodation and travel costs to make sure that you come and can join us and do a science slam. At the very least, you would get like the recognition for being top 5 for that. So that might be a motivation for some of you. But the reason for this is not a competition. The reason for this is to give you feedback and give you the certification. But if you're interested in the Science Slam, this could be a stepping stone towards that. That's number one. Number two, when is the deadline to send the 10-minute video? We will announce it in the last webinar next week when that's going to be happening. We will give you some time, probably around 2 weeks or something like that after the last webinar. But I encourage you to start thinking about it right now, because the longer time you have, the better it's going to be, I guess. And the more work you put into it, maybe more constructive feedback we can give back to you.
And we're really looking forward to receive all your videos. So thanks again for joining us, and see you all next Thursday. Yep.
Thank you very much. We will upload the things on the website like normally. We'll put the video on the website. We will put the presentation on the website. And if you are registered a member of EURAXESS China, you will probably be getting our newsletters every week, like our flash notes, email flash notes, and every week we do link the last week's recordings if we have them. So thank you very much, Anna. Thanks to everybody here today. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you everybody that is helping out with all of this. I'm really looking forward to next week with Dr. Chong. Thank you.
Bye bye. Have a good evening or have a good day, everybody. Ciao.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.